I'm auditor of the Hist. Thank you so much for attending this evening's debate. We are debating This House Regrets the Creation of Feminist Icons. Just to explain, we have these type of debates every Wednesday night, so please check out our term card for if there's any other debates that might interest you. But first and foremost, let me just explain. Weirdly enough, there's two parts to this evening. Basically, the first part is private business. The second part is public business. So in private business, we just go through the inner workings of the society. It's really quick, like we can do it in 5 minutes tops, even less. And it's kind of just the inner workings of the society. We're an old society, so it's kind of like a traditional thing that we do. And then in public business, we actually do the debate. So without further ado, I'll just head straight into private business, and I'd now like to call upon Olivia Brady to chair private business.
First order and call upon the record secretary to read the minutes of the last private business meeting.
The last private business meeting was on the 3rd of February 2021 with Ben Ryan in the chair. There were no fines, no reports to be read, no motions on notice, and no motions not on notice.
Are there any objections to my signing these minutes as a true and accurate reflection of the last private business meeting? I shall duly sign. I cede the floor to the auditor.
Excellent. Now I'm going to basically ask a series of kind of silly questions, but it's just a formality. So first up, Madam Treasurer, are there any fines?
There are no fines.
There are never any fines. It's a useless question. Anyway, on to Madam Librarian. Could you open question time?
Time for questions is now open.
Excellent. So this is an opportunity actually for the audience to interact with us. So if you as a member have a question about the society, whether that is to do with like a certain department, an event we're running, or just anything like how our day is going, feel free to ask that now in the Q&A function or in the chat. We'll give you guys just a couple of like seconds just to shoot it in, maybe like 30 seconds. Just rambling now to fill up the time. Tell us about Harneys. Ooh, I think I'll direct that question to the convener or the co-convener of Harneys if she is able to talk at the moment.
Yes, I went off screen to go get an earring and then I ran back when I heard the word Harneys and then I dropped one. So Harneys is typically an internal competition within the Hist. And this year we've expanded it to everyone who is non-binary / a woman on the Irish debate circuit. I don't know how old the competition is, but it's very old. We've bought a new trophy for this year. It will be super fun. Lots of celebration of all things feminine. And yeah, I'm really excited for it. So thank you very much for whoever sent in that question.
That is an absolutely excellent use of question time. We love to see it. Also, Harneys is named after Mary Harney, who was the first female auditor of the Hist, which is excellent too. If there are no other questions, which I don't think there are, Madam Librarian?
Time for questions is now closed.
Fabulous. Now on to Mr. Record Secretary. Are there any motions on notice?
There are no motions on notice.
Are there any motions not on notice?
There are no motions not on notice.
Are there any reports to be read?
There are no reports to be read.
Excellent. And then finally back to Madam Treasurer, are there any fines?
There are still no fines.
Excellent. Okay, and then without further ado, I'd like to cede the floor back to the chair. Woo! Excellent. So that's private business done and over with. Super quick and easy. Thank you so much, Olivia, for chairing. And now moving on to public business, I'd now like to call upon Professor Mary McAuliffe to take the chair for public business this evening.
Ooh. Yes, sorry, I was running around too. Thank you. I would like to call the House to order and call on the Record Secretary to read the minutes of the last public business meeting.
So the fact that I'm a man in a debate about feminism is not lost on me, but it kind of got me thinking about feminism and about feminist icons. And I wondered, you know, what have feminist icons ever actually achieved?
What do you have?
It's a Hist thing.
All right. So what's going on?
I have to talk about feminist icons.
Feminist, oh, great, fair play to you.
Yeah. So what have feminist icons ever actually done?
Well, they introduced equal voting rights.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Apart from equal voting rights, what have feminist icons ever actually done?
The contraception rights.
Yeah, okay. Apart from equal voting rights and contraception, what have feminist icons ever actually?
Well, there was bodily autonomy.
Yeah, okay. Equal voting rights, contraception, bodily autonomy, fair enough. But apart from that, what have feminist icons?
They contributed fairly strongly to marriage equality.
Okay, yeah, marriage equality, bodily autonomy, contraception. Apart from those things, what have feminist icons really achieved?
Well, they dramatically shrunk the gender pay gap.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Pay gap, marriage equality, bodily autonomy. Those things aside, what have feminist icons really achieved?
Well, growing equality in the workplace.
Okay, well, yeah, growing equality, gender pay gap, marriage equality, bodily autonomy, contraception, equal voting rights, that's fair enough. But apart from those things, what have feminist icons actually achieved?
Hey, Sean, what are you up to?
Hi, Steve. It's a feminist thing I'm talking about, what feminist icons have achieved. So apart from all those things, what have feminist icons ever really achieved? I mean,
maybe greater access to education.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Access to education.
The right to initiate the divorce proceedings.
Repealing the ban on women in the armed forces.
Campaigns against domestic violence.
Yeah. The right to own property.
Unions for working women.
Yeah, okay, fine. But apart from all of that, what have feminist icons ever actually achieved?
Presidents?
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Feminist icons, they've been pretty great.
Well, that's sure.
I think you're on mute, Mary.
All right, sorry. Excellent report from Mr. Secretary. Any objections? And if not, I will sign the minutes. I now call on the auditor to explain the standing orders and to introduce the invited guests to the House.
Sorry, that honestly some of my favorite minutes of this year. Excellent stuff. So firstly, just to introduce our invited guests, we're delighted to have Professor Mary McAuliffe in the chair this evening. McAuliffe, sorry. Oh, God,
McAuliffe.
I'm so useless with names. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Honestly, I should be fined every time.
It's a hard one.
No, I should be fined every time I mispronounce a chair name or a guest name. I do it too often. Anyway, back on track. Dr. Mary McAuliffe is assistant professor in gender studies in UCD. She holds a PhD from Trinity College Dublin. She specializes in Irish women's and gender history and has written extensively on the role of women in the Easter Rising and Irish women history and oral history more generally. She was the president of the Women's History Association of Ireland from 2011 and 2014. She remains a committee member of the association. Mary has also been involved in a number of public history projects, including the 1916 expeditions and the commemorative quill project at Richmond Barracks and the 1916 centenary expedition at the Royal College of Surgeons. We're absolutely delighted to have her here today, chairing her second debate of the year. So delighted to have you. Then on to standing orders. So speeches this evening will be 7 minutes in length for students, with the first and last minute protected. What are they protected from? They're protected from POIs, so points of information. So points of information is the opportunity for opposing speakers, but also the audience to basically ask a question of the speaker. And this question can kind of be like a challenging question, if that makes sense, and to, get them off their thing if you really want to challenge the person, but whatever. Or it can be a clarifying question, whatever you feel like. But if you want to make one of these POIs, you can do so through the Q&A function or by typing POI into the chat. Please feel free to do this. It's great to see the interaction in the debate. Finally, after we have all speakers have spoken, we will have a poll over Zoom to basically see which side of the house wins. And also, I'd like to draw your attention to oratory turns. This is basically a form that you can fill out, ranking the speakers, letting us know how you thought of their speeches. This is really important because at the end of the year, we actually give a monetary award to the best speaker of this session. So please do fill out this form. It really means a lot to our speakers, and it's super easy to do, and it's all anonymous, so don't worry about it. I'll just post the form into the chat, and please do fill it out. But without further ado, I'll cede the floor back to the chair. I think that's everything I have to say, thank God.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. And it is my great delight to introduce this question before the House this evening. I must say, one of my favourites. This House regrets the creation of feminist icons. And I would now like to call upon Julie Linan to propose the motion to the House.
Hello, can you all hear me okay? Excellent, okay. My name is Julie and I am very proud to propose the motion "This House regrets the creation of feminist icons" before our virtual chamber this evening. I'm going to start by considering precisely what I mean by feminism. In its most basic sense, feminism to me is about liberation. It's about equal rights for every person who knows themselves to be put down by the system because of their gender. It is the dismantling of a capitalist patriarchy which is designed to uphold and perpetuate its own oppressions. Above all, it is and must be collective. Feminism is about the we, it is about the us, it is about everyone. And as I will outline, the creation of individual feminist icons is in direct opposition to that. But first, the onus is not on the proposition of this debate to prove that we regret individuals who have adopted much needed feminist thought, and certainly not those who have done incredible work for the cause, including but not limited to some of the achievements outlined in Sean's minutes. Their work is not at issue here, but their designation as icons is. Feminist icons did not create this status for themselves, whether we're talking about activists or theorists, Judith Butlers or Audre Lordes, Emily Pankhurst, or even social media influencers. Even the modern day Instagram girl boss feminist icons, who are part of the problem because of their deliberate marketing of feminism, they're only a symptom of this issue, they're not the cause. I'm not going to put down anybody for surviving or thriving within this capitalist patriarchy, even if they do use feminist talking points to do so. No, the problem here is not the work of individuals in the name of feminism. It is the apotheosis of the individual. It is their elevation to a god or goddess-like status where the person gets put before the cause. Feminist icons are PR. They're pithy and they're damaging, as I will get into now. Feminist icons do more harm than good, as they are, without exception, some kind of reflection of the very patriarchy which feminism is trying to dismantle. When we're talking about icons, we're talking about the apex of popular success. I'm not talking about the influencers with 10,000 followers. I'm talking about the influencers with 10 million followers. And these are, by and large, with some exceptions, white, thin, non-disabled, stereotypically attractive feminist icons who reflect society's standards. Within a patriarchal, classist, ableist, racist society, success and iconic status is far easier to achieve to those who consciously or otherwise adhere to its central tenets. Whatever the politics or the beliefs of an individual, the path to iconic status is paved in privilege. Now, I'm not going to speak outside my own experiences on this, but even the work of disabled people, of people of color, of the LGBT+ community must often be cherry-picked, de-radicalized, and presented as palatable in order for them to achieve astronomical success and iconic status. Now, obviously, it is still more difficult for marginalized people to achieve mainstream success within this system. Do diversify your feeds, platform their voices. But the point here is that the creation of feminist icons requires popular support. And popular support invariably comes from the very society which we are trying to change. It makes us feel better about living in the patriarchy if we can point to an icon and say, look at them go. In the words of Taylor Swift, it is a band-aid for a bullet hole. However good their intentions, feminist icons can't help to dismantle the system because their iconic status is upheld by the system. Again, this is no fault of the individual, it is rather a reflection of the ways in which celebrity culture and feminist icon culture props up its own value system in insidious ways. I'm timekeeping myself, Reid. Now, this doesn't just go for influencers, of course, but anyone who achieves not just social media popular acclaim, and really any kind of singular acclaim that's aimed at the individual. Feminist icons can be theorists, writers, suffragettes, but to put it simply, if your feminism has a face, it is going to be a reflection of society in one way or another, and it isn't going to espouse the kind of collective action that feminism needs to be about. Now, while of course we have to have leaders, we have to have inspiration, it is the elevation of these leaders to iconic status which hurts the collective cause by making it about the individual. And while this has always been a problem on some level, this is something that has been drastically accelerated in the social media age. Now, on a further point, the creation of feminist icons is not only detrimental to this notion of the collective, it actively harms people who already experience misogyny. The people who experience the least scrutiny are always cisgendered men. Everyone else in the public eye comes under significantly more pressure to be a feminist icon, even if this is not their brand. Feminism shouldn't be a brand, but that's by the by. Everyone needs space to learn. Everyone needs space to be held accountable. But the fact remains that if you are representing yourself in a public space and you happen to be a member of a marginalized gender, the likelihood is that you're going to come under pressure to start representing feminism and to make your activism public. When in reality, you may only be in the public eye because you run a business or play a professional sport or act or model. Now, I'm not saying we don't hold celebrities accountable. I'm not saying people in the public eye shouldn't use their platform for good. What I am saying is that the pressure to do this for any cause is always greater for people who are part of the community oppressed by the issues at hand. In the case of feminism, this is people who have lived experience of misogyny. Now, this added pressure, not experienced by cis men, is a form of misogyny. It is not acceptable to demand of any marginalized group that they represent that group in their every public movement. As a woman, it is not acceptable to expect women who are just doing their jobs to be feminist icons. Yet this is what happens when we create iconic standards. It is holding them to a higher standard than their male counterparts. It is misogyny. The idea that there are people whose feminism is somehow perfect, who are elevated above the rest of us, extends the pressure to hit that standard to anybody who occupies a public space. And while I wish this affected cis men as badly, the sad fact is it doesn't. It's an old adage that the people who are hardest on women are other women, and as a woman, in my experience, this is too often true. Creating an icon almost always means tearing them down eventually. Creating feminist icons not only betrays the collective, but it tears down individual members of the movement. When these individuals are unwitting because they're in the public eye for a reason other than their feminism, it is tearing down women and gender minorities. All this does, in turn, is hold up the very patriarchy which feminism is trying to destroy. Now, none of this is to say that we can't be inspired by other feminists. We still have to have leaders. We can still reflect on those who came before us. We can admire their successes. We can consider their mistakes. We can bring the lessons they learned about their fight into our own. We can look at the people around us who are fighting for equality and think about the ways in which we can do the same. What we should not do, however, is elevate them to any kind of iconic status. We shouldn't think that they can do no wrong, and we definitely shouldn't make them the face of a movement, which at the end of the day shouldn't be about the individual. It should be about everyone. And for these reasons, I'm extremely proud to propose this motion.
Thank you very much. Julie, we're off to a powerful start there, and now I call on Olivia Brady to oppose the motion.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So admittedly, I had to look up who specifically was considered a feminist icon because beyond, Michelle Obama, Margaret Atwood, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I wasn't really sure who the rest of today's feminist icons were. Who'd have thought Prince Harry, of all people, was considered officially a feminist icon? I mean, to be honest, I never really kept up with his feminist engagements, so they always escaped me. But aside from his actual work regarding feminism, one of the reasons Glamour magazine has listed him as a feminist icon is because his wife was also a feminist. I mean, that's just a bit of a non-reason for me. I mean, he's considered a face representing feminism because of association with another feminist. I understand, anyway, aside from Prince Harry rant, understand that there are many drawbacks to placing people on pedestals, that individual may be a great in the moment, but could end up doing something stupid and disappointing everyone. And of course, it places a lot of pressure on that individual to, if your entire public image is defined by your engagement with a certain political issue. And I know I don't agree with all feminist icons being considered feminist icons, but they are still an important part of the movement. And my disliking of them does not stop them from holding some sort of importance to some people in that capacity. So I'll discuss why I think feminist icons with that status are actually anything other than regrettable. So an icon for me is somebody we consider a representative or a symbol of a certain movement. A feminist icon is therefore someone we feel embodies feminist thought and action, either for starting a movement within feminism, such as the Me Too movement, for being vocal on issues relating to feminism in general. And of course, the grassroots feminists are a vital part of the movement, but the people at the forefront are just as important too. They're the ones most visible by opponents to feminism, as often they appear on national, international media and make the issues known outside the movement itself. That meaning they are the ones who have the platform to denounce opponents or, to put it bluntly, misogynists. They are the ones who may be outrightly opposed to feminism or think that 21st century no longer really needs feminism because, women have the votes, so what more could they possibly want? First of all, icons as public representatives. Naturally, notoriety comes with being considered an icon, and since they fulfill a representative function in society, they are important to the movement because they display to the world the importance that feminism still has in the 21st century. An example that immediately comes to mind is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez responding to Ted Yoho, calling her a fucking bitch in July just a few months ago. As she says herself in Congress, that word is used again almost against all women at some point in their lives, whether it's because they're leading a group, and of course, a woman in a leadership position is so threatening, so the logical thing to do is call her a bitch. And this word in particular is so misogynistically loaded, and when it's used against you by a man or even another woman, it has, on me at least, a sort of a winding effect. It sort of robs you of any strength to fight back, because how do you fight back against that kind of word? So when Ocasio-Cortez stood up against that publicly in Congress, not only seen by Americans, but globally, she represented not only herself, but all women who have been met with that word and felt powerless in the face of it. And I know that word is used by everyone in varying contexts, like some people use it in a jokey, friendly sort of a way, and that is their prerogative. But because a principal use of this word is to viciously tell a woman that you find her unpleasant, I'm glad that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez finally brought attention to this and how not new or out of the ordinary that word is. And if we didn't have someone in that kind of an icon status, how would we get the message out to so many people and to tell so many people who don't think it's a misogynistic word that it is in fact a misogynistic word? We need people like who have that kind of public standing, who are going to be seen by millions to get the message out there more strongly. And it's not going to just happen with people on the grassroots because we don't have that kind of influence. So I'm glad she said that, because as she says again in Congress, that word is not accepted. And how many times has a man or woman in your own family, let alone in society in general, called you a bitch in a clear attempt to put you down? Because for me, I can't tell you, I just can't count that. Most of us barely have the time in the day to stand up for ourselves or even have the energy to explain to the uninterested, arrogant, self-serving man who just called us a bitch why it's misogynistic. So I'm glad there are people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who do represent me in this capacity, who have a platform to tell millions of people why a word can be harmful, because I don't have it in me to tell everybody that I have eventually come across and everybody that I know already why I and all women deserve respect and not to be cut down because we've done something that displeases you. So yes, thank God for feminist icons like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who, as well as many other feminists, male or female, considered feminist icons, refuses to be silent on these things, because I will be the first to admit I stayed silent for a long time myself, and for too long as well. So it is important that we, as the individual grassroots feminists, have individuals that we can look up to. Someone who talks about their experiences of misogyny and oppression in a public forum that answer the questions of misogynists pose to try and undermine the feminist cause. If you live in a place so unsympathetic to feminism while you experience misogyny on a regular basis, and I'm not talking about myself here, but others who have it much worse than I do, seeing somebody not only be so open about their similar experiences, but so unapologetically and boldly declare the unfairness of it can be tremendously empowering. And we can't underestimate the impact the image of an individual being so strong can have on somebody who feels so weak. And naturally, the people we place on these pedestals are still people and capable of mistakes and disappointing us, but that shouldn't undermine the work or creation of other feminist icons in society. The mistakes of certain people, such as Susan Braunmüller, should not tarnish the position of feminist icon for others, and certainly should not preclude future feminists, future men or women from holding that position. For anyone who's not aware of Susan Braunmüller, she and how she was a feminist and later disappointed everyone, she wrote a book in the mid-70s called Against Our Will, Men, Women and Rape. And this book is described as redefining the discourse on rape as a political problem rather than just an individual crime. And then in 2015, she criticized certain women for looking like hookers, criticized women for not leaving abusive relationships, and even victim blamed in regard to rape as well, after all the work she had done on the importance of consent. Of course, I do not support any of her later comments, but her work in the 70s should not take the fall because of it. And the fact that we have to create, the fact that we have or create feminist icons is not a regrettable thing. In fact, I would be surprised to hear if there's one person here who has never felt represented or heard by someone widely considered a feminist icon, whether that be Princess Fiona from Shrek or Prince Harry himself. So much good has come from individuals at the forefront of the feminist movement. If we regret them or their creation, we regret the progress they brought with them. Thank you all very much for listening. I urge you to oppose.
Thank you very much there, Olivia, and for keeping the standard which was set in the first speech at that a very high level. You know, you all have the potential to become feminist icons. I'd like now to call in our third speaker to propose the motion again, Mary Bishop, or Marie.
Hi. Hi. Just getting a timer. Okay, so basically in the speech, I'm going to argue how the existence of feminist icons has been damaging to the feminist movement. Firstly, I'm going to argue that these feminist icons are fallible human beings, and the fact that they can make mistakes reflects badly on the feminist movement when we put them on these pedestals. And then secondly, I'm going to explain that their opinions, and no matter what kind of opinions they hold, whether or not they uphold feminism or kind of isolate some groups of women from the feminist movement, and their opinions can impact how the feminist movement is viewed as a whole. I'm also just going to acknowledge Sean's speech, which he gave an excellent speech. However, I would say that the fact that all of these things have been achieved by women in the past, like voting rights, bodily autonomy rights, I would say that these achievements were achieved because large groups of women were behind these so-called feminist icons. Yes, these women were the figureheads behind which we rallied, but there was massive protests. There were so many women who were behind the fight for the right to vote and the right to bodily autonomy. So I wouldn't say that it's the existence of these feminist icons that led to these rights being won. I'd say that if the feminist icons had never existed, we still would have won these rights because they're half of the global population consists of women. So I'm sure at some point these women would have risen up to fight for the rights that we deserve. I don't think that necessarily it was the fact that the feminist icons existed is why this happened. But what is a feminist icon? So what do we consider feminist icons? So a celebrity or famous person who is thought to uphold feminist values is what I would consider a feminist person. So people who strive for gender equality. So just to put that in context, if there was a film star who refused, a man or a woman who refused for the female co-star to be paid less than the male co-star who's argued that she deserved equal pay, women who refuse to take parts wherein they'll be sexually objectified, and I would say that those are feminist stances to take. And examples of feminist icons would be Emma Watson, Benedict Cumberbatch, Serena Williams, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. However, we believe that there are problems with idolizing these people as feminist icons. We can understand that they have feminist values, and that they uphold their feminist values, but we think it's wrong to idolize and put these people on a pedestal. So my first point is that it's damaging to the feminist movement. So another definition of what a feminist icon is a human being who is capable of making mistakes. So these people who we say are feminist icons are not perfect. They're not always going to uphold the absolute values that we think should be feminist values. We have created a system wherein the mistakes and actions of a few people can massively impact an entire movement because these people are considered the forefront of this movement. So we put them on an absolute pedestal, which we believe is harmful. So an example of this would be associations with sexist people can impact the movement, making it look fake, or that feminists aren't willing to uphold accountability of people who are sexist. And some of these feminist icons don't realize that they're associating with someone who has been sexist in the past. A lot of people who came out in support of Harvey Weinstein in the beginning without realizing how he'd been a complete sexual predator didn't realize that he was a sexual predator. Well, the fact that these so-called feminist icons, men who had worked with Harvey Weinstein, didn't realize the horrible things that were going on behind closed doors. These people were damaging to the feminist movement in the sense that it made it look like these so-called feminist icons weren't actually true feminists because they weren't willing to believe women when they came forward with these accusations. So we believe it's harmful to the entire feminist movement when we put a few people on this pedestal. So feminist icons can uphold feminism in some areas and not in others. So an example of this would be like J.K. Rowling, who for so many years we consider an extremely successful woman. She never gave up. We've all heard the stories about like how so many publishers turned her down for Harry Potter, and she kept going and kept striving for the sake of her and her child. But it turns out in recent times it's come to light that she's an extremely transphobic person. And that's another instance wherein like her actions and opinions are reflecting badly on the feminist movement. Like this woman that we put on a pedestal as like something to strive towards, like women who want to be authors, she's probably an idol of theirs. Like this is what a feminist author looks like someone who was continuing to be willing to strive forward despite all the odds, despite any oppression she was facing. But it now turns out that she's incredibly oppressive to another group. We just think it's extremely damaging that a person like this was put on a pedestal and was like, she gets so many like privileges and rights that many other like women don't face. So like obviously she's impacting transgender people an incredible amount because she's been given such a platform as a so-called feminist, when in fact she doesn't support huge amounts of women who are transgender. So like this means that these women feel very isolated from the feminist movement because this woman is considered such a massive feminist, but she doesn't support them in the slightest. So my second point is that feminist icons have unnecessary and undeserving power over the feminist movement. So with great power comes great responsibility, and their opinions can impact millions of people in two ways. Firstly, it can make people feel isolated and alienated. And secondly, it can impact people's viewpoints in a negative way. So my first point, feminist icons represent the entire movement. So their opinions are indicative of the entire movement. So they can impact so many people. So people from marginalized groups can feel isolated from society, but they find comfort in the feminist movement, like Black women or trans women who don't find like acceptance in other places can be sure that they'll find acceptance in the feminist movement, because this is a movement that accepts all women for who they are and offers support to all women. But when people who are touted and flaunted as feminist icons but are in fact like racist or transphobic or bigoted in any way, this isolates these groups of people from the feminist movement because they don't feel as welcome, because we consider these women excellent feminists, but like because they uphold their white feminism and they're like very encouraging to like the white rich women in society, but they're not willing to like help Black women in society, and they're not willing to like support trans women in society in their transitions. It can be extremely isolating for these groups of women to be part of the feminist movement when we put these transphobic racist women on pedestals. And then secondly, they can impact people because like if we put them on a pedestal, they could be encouraging like bigoted views. This is basically an extension of my last point, wherein if white women are constantly listening to these women who are touted as feminist icons, they're more likely to believe what they say. Like these people are considered extremely respected in society. So obviously if they're saying something important or something that you would consider important, you're more likely to believe what they're saying. So like even in like subtle ways, they can be like subtly influencing your views without outright saying like, I don't think Black women deserve a place in the feminist movement, but maybe they say something like, oh, Black women tend to be more aggressive than white women, and you're subtly going to believe that because it's coming from a place of respect. So we just believe that putting these women on a pedestal and considering them feminist icons, they have an impact on the entire feminist movement, and we believe that this is generally harmful for the feminist movement and many women who deserve a place in the feminist movement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie. That was excellent. I must say all the speeches so far have been excellent, so standards are high in the Hist tonight. I'd like now to call on our fourth speaker to oppose the motion, Alva Elizabeth Newton.
All right, 2 seconds. I just set up my timer. Okay, so I want to talk in my speech a little bit about iconography itself and the idea of putting people on pedestals, whether that be via social media influencers or dating all the way back to, you know, the Dark Ages and the Anglo-Saxon period, where people were elevated to the status of saint within the church and even older. I also want to talk a little bit about how seeing a figurehead doing something that you yourself want to do can be majorly influential. And finally, towards the end of my speech, if you'll allow me, I want to get a little bit more passionate about this. So firstly, iconography. Iconography has long been used by dominant institutions, by the patriarchy and by systems such as the Catholic Church, things like that, to uphold and weaponize certain values that were ascribed to various individuals who were designated as saintly or saints. therefore they represent the best of mankind, the absolute best that we had to offer. And many of the female figures that were elevated by the Catholic Church were elevated not just because of their devotion to religion, but also because of the manner in which they went about relations with men, the manner in which they dedicated their lives. They didn't express themselves as female, as women. They either locked themselves away as nuns, granted that may have been by choice, or they, much like St. Athelthorth, for instance, who refused to have, by the sort of famous accounts by people like Bede, refused to have sex with her husband because she wanted to keep her body pure. And so iconography and the, elevating people to icon status is not a new thing. But what I will say is that the creation of so-called feminist icons is a way of reclaiming that. It's a way of saying, we recognize that this has always been happening. This has long been happening, but we're going to take that concept and turn it on its head, because as a group of people who have long been marginalized, long been oppressed, we're going to suddenly have these figures ourselves that we're going to say represent who we are, who we want to be. They're not infallible. I recognize that. I recognize the very valid points proposed by the proposition. But at the same time, seeing those people and having the ability to raise those people to that status is something that's so important to a group of people who would otherwise have had nothing. And so that leads into my second point. Feminist icons can help inspire people who may otherwise be completely left out. Is that a POI? Yeah, go ahead.
Is it not massively reductive to reduce people down to being an icon for a movement that they didn't consent to being an icon for and might not necessarily believe in just because they were born a woman?
Perhaps, but I don't think that's why most feminist icons are elevated to the status of feminist icons. They're normally put there because, at least in the modern day, they believed in the movement or they contributed, they had some sort of voice. So I don't think the two necessarily go hand in hand. I also think that seeing a woman in an area otherwise dominated by men or other dominant groups and seeing her actually succeed and go far in that area is a huge impetus to anyone, any young girl, any young woman who has an aspiration but who is afraid of taking that leap, who's afraid of getting involved because she feels like she can't, because she's been taught her whole life that she should be quiet, because she's been told that she doesn't have the skills, hasn't been taken seriously in subjects like STEM because she may not, she doesn't fit the norm. And so seeing that women can succeed is a massive, massive benefit. It is a powerful boost. Seeing female scientists, politicians, writers, mathematicians, anyone is a huge, it allows so many people to see that, yes, it's possible. It's not just possible, it is entirely achievable for so many young people. And even for me personally, learning about all these, these early women writers, these people who had taken that they'd gone against the grain, they'd taken that leap, they had actually gotten involved. It massively inspired me, gave me the belief that maybe one day I could be a businesswoman or I could be a politician, I could step up to that plate. And I could do something that women for many, many centuries were not allowed to do. And granted, I'm certainly not one to speak on modern day oppression, given my own identity. But I think it's still hugely important to see women succeed and to see people actively representing that success. What's interesting is looking back on some of my English classes in school, I now realize we actually didn't study a single female author. And, perhaps that wasn't necessarily the fault of the teacher who had limited resources to work with, but it does make an interesting point about women speaking up. And I always noticed that, while there was definitely an element of I don't particularly enjoy speaking in class, there's also an element of women being a little bit more tentative to raise their voices and a little bit more unsure of themselves. And so seeing even modern day female writers come out and talk about their work with this confidence and eloquence and class, that was hugely inspirational to me. I absolutely loved that. I loved having people that I could look to, that I could say, well, there's people like Jane Austen, there's people like Mary Wollstonecraft, and in the modern day, there's people like Sally Rooney and other writers who stand up and who take ownership of their work and comment on it. And, for me, that is everything. Because finally, women have been invisible for so long in history. For so long, they were forced to stay in the shadows just because of who they are, because they were born women. Because the idea of a successful woman and the idea of a woman who wasn't controlled or subjugated or at home in the private sphere was something that most likely terrified the men in power, most likely terrified a lot of people. And so I say that women have been in the shadows long enough. Women have been relegated to background roles, to the private sphere. That belief, that old-fashioned belief that men have power, women have influence over the men, and that's their only capacity. It's about time we left that behind. It's about time that anonymous poems, anonymous historical documents, anonymous essays were actually named and identified, and that women can come out of the shadows and take ownership of who they are and what they do. And having these feminist icons helps so many people to do that. It gives them an additional boost of confidence that they otherwise might not have. So as I and many, many women before me have said, let women find the spotlight they deserve. Let them come into their own. Let them succeed in the public eye, and let them be iconic. Thank you very much. I beg you to oppose the motion.
Thank you very much, Alva, and that was a wonderful speech, and I'm glad you brought in the iconography of the saints. One of my favorite saints, of course, is Saint Bridget, an icon. And now to propose the motion, we have Martha McKinney-Perry.
So I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Feminist icons pose a significant threat to the progress of gender equality. They breed complacency. They reduce countless women down to their gender alone, which, spoiler, is massively hypocritical for a movement that claims to not do that. And it draws attention away from the gender-based violence faced by real people every day. Members of the College Historical Society. My name is Martha, and tonight I want to talk about 3 things. First, girl boss feminism and its problems. Second, the people we leave behind in creating feminist icons. And third, what the alternative looks like. But firstly, I don't agree with Alva that a successful woman is necessarily a feminist icon. I take issue with that. I'm going to bring that up in this speech. But I genuinely think even if we didn't have feminist icons, people would still be inspired to create. Because a female author existing doesn't mean they're a feminist icon. It doesn't mean they should be tied to a movement that their actions didn't agree with. Look, on girl boss feminism, there are 2 ways to become a feminist icon, according to Glamour magazine's top 30. Firstly, by being a woman in a position of power, regardless of your actual beliefs, policies, or actions. And secondly, by being a cis man who states that women deserve rights sometimes, as Olivia rightly pointed out, is pretty much Prince Harry in the situation. But I mainly take issue with the first. I think there is a monumental difference between being a feminist icon and a feminist activist, because one is a person who fights for gender equality on the ground, who pushes for policy change, who lifts up underrepresented voices and tries to ensure that their voices are heard too. The other is an icon and a hero just by being a woman at the top of her field. I think this is massively reductive. This is the pinnacle of girl boss feminism, allegedly empowering a woman while actually just ignoring all the nuances of her personality and reducing her to her gender. She's feminist only because of the arbitrary gender she was assigned at her birth. And she's feminist because we pretend that the victory of one woman is the same as victory for all women, that one woman's success is the same as progress. I think that's how British newspapers justified calling Margaret Thatcher a feminist icon after her death in 2013. Because it didn't matter what she believed or how she acted or if she had any interest in eradicating gender inequality. All that mattered was that she was a woman who had managed to get her piece of the pie. And note that these are the vast majority of feminist icons we're talking about. Girl boss women, women with some semblance of power. I don't think we're talking about Emma Watson or Margaret Atwood or Malala, because crucially, we don't only engage with them for being icons. They are activists and would still be fighting for equality even if we had never created the feminist icon. But we're talking about actresses who are labeled feminist icons despite never taking a stance on gender equality or pushing for change. Kylie Jenner stating that she's a feminist despite what the tabloids say, but never protesting or donating or contributing to feminist discourse in any way other than fuck men. These feminist icons have no meaningful link to feminism. They are not heroes. They are just women who happen to be in a position of power. They do not follow the principles of feminism in their words and in their actions. And I reject the idea that we should glorify them as if they do. And what about the people that we leave behind? There's a limited amount of our time and our attention and the media attention ever given to feminism. And it's easier to talk about the more palatable, bite-sized, relatable feminist icons than to recognize the long-lasting effects of gender inequality on actual people. It's more convenient to say, look at the first woman doing X. Look at the first female vice president of the United States of America, the first woman to be president of the European Commission, the first woman to officiate the US Super Bowl. It's more convenient than having the hard conversations about what happens when progress doesn't happen. But we leave thousands of victims of gender-based inequality behind when we limit our engagement with feminist discourse to woman with a high-paying job is so iconic. We fail them. We fail the millions of victims of female genital mutilation across the world who, as children, undergo unimaginable torture that leads to severe blood loss, infection, and often death. We fail the countless women who disappear every day and are never found, like the Inuit women in Canada who are disproportionately stolen from the streets to be assaulted, murdered, and trafficked. These are women who live in constant fear of being taken, knowing that it could happen at any moment, that it could happen to their sister or their mother or their friend. Women who offer their DNA to the police when they turn 18, so when it happens, their bodies can be identified. And we fail the men who are physically and psychologically tortured during their time at school and at university, the men who are hazed in student societies and fraternities, made to endure freezing conditions or consume inedible items or humiliate themselves for the entertainment of others, but who have this hazing tied to their masculinity, so they are unable to escape it. I'm disappointed at the lack of any engagement on gender equality affecting men either tonight, to be honest. But these are the same men who are conditioned to believe that talking about what they've gone through means they have failed to be a man and that they will never, ever be worthy of love. The men who suffer silently and are often unable to access the kind of support system that could offer the tiniest bit of relief. We fail all these people again and again and again when we never talk about what they're facing, when we leave them to suffer in the dark, when we do the easy thing of calling a female CEO a success story and an icon, instead of facing the people who need feminism and equality the most and doing our best to help them. What do I think is the alternative to having these feminist icons? I think it means taking actual feminist action, having hard conversations, talking to survivors of gender-based violence. I think it means protesting, and sure, you've very little time, but sure.
I just want to say, is it not possible for us to both acknowledge feminist icons while also talking about the wider issues?
Well, I think there's already inherent problems with feminist icons that I've pointed out, but the problem is the limited amount of media attention and individual attention that is generally devoted to feminism means that there is necessarily a mutual exclusivity between the two. That's where the problem lies. But I think like what happens on Proposition is we're talking about protesting and educating the people in society about the harms of gender inequality and the need for change. I think it means putting activists like Eva on the news for debates and interviews. Shout out for Eva. But instead of analysing the symbolic importance of Kamala Harris's inauguration outfit, I think it means giving media coverage to the iterated gender-based violence that takes place all over the world instead of sweeping its inconvenient truth under the rug. I hope it means that one day we don't have to tell ourselves that a woman at the top of her field is some kind of feminist hero. We can assess a person's commitment to feminism based on their personal beliefs, their actions, the policies they're willing to fight for, the stories they're willing to listen to. And at the end of that, they still don't have to be a hero or an icon. I think crucially, we need to reject girl boss feminism and feminist icons. We need to admit that symbolism and needless glorification are worthless compared to real experiences and real action. And we need to realize that now is the time to act. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martha. Powerful there, and delighted somebody mentioned Margaret Thatcher. And now I call on our final speaker to oppose the motion, Eva O'Byrne.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay, cool. Okay, so 3, 2. Okay, so admittedly preparing for this motion actually wasn't that hard, and I know that's an awful thing to say about a motion that deals with an issue that is pretty complex in its nature. And I'm not trying to undersell the fact that we need to discuss how we create and remember and reflect on feminist icons. I just want you all to realize my panic when I found out that I was going after the lovely Martha, because her first chamber speech made me cry. So yeah, like you could say that Martha herself is iconic. And like maybe because I've complimented her now, but maybe because she'll get offended because I called her a girl boss, she might give me a POI, she mightn't. Please don't give me one. So anyway, there's a few things that I want to discuss today. And they all revolve around the same central theme of perception, image, and how we perceive things and why we perceive them in this way. And spoiler, it's due to internalized misogyny, so woo. The creation of a feminist icon often relies on imagery and artistry and how we choose to remember the existence of a person. And although Proposition could have cited unattainable ideals and impossible standards, and I obviously wrote this speech in the past tense, so we'll see how good I am at prediction here. I'm kind of right. I think the concept of a feminist icon is funny to debate, really, because I would love to see a bunch of men deliberate whether men should be celebrated. And besides that, I think it is through the revisiting of the past and the contemporary view of feminist icons that allow us to see the flaws within mainly feminine beings. The creation of feminist icons and the reflection of them by current commentators allows us to realize that women can be great achievers, and the things that they do we can strive for. And how can you possibly regret the concept of wanting to strive for something more than you are? And for a long time, notable women had to adhere to a certain standard to be written about. They had to tick certain boxes, and they had to appeal to a male audience to be remembered or celebrated. And I don't regret the creation of feminist icons for this reason, because feminist icons have allowed for women and non-binary people to take back the imagery and reform it into what should be remembered. Within being a feminist icon, you can and should be able to find a range of people with different beliefs and different ways of life and different ways of looking. A feminist icon is not always the well-bodied, attractive, and hardworking stereotype that we often look to for inspiration. The feminist icon could be Rosie the Riveter or any form of pin-up. The feminist icon could be anyone, terrible or great. It is ultimately the person's decision to admire them at the end of the day. And our standards change, and as we learn more about what it means to support other women, we cast off the previous shackles of internalized misogyny, which really is kind of the important thing within this debate. So a lot of people often crucify female icons who indulged in their sexuality, and they continue to. And there is an actual presumption medically that if a woman is sexual, she is less intelligent. And that was written into the actual Irish legislation for the Poor Law Act. So you may be wondering why this even matters to the speech. Well, I wanted to talk about Marilyn Monroe as a feminist icon because she's someone I find very endearing, strong, and yeah, a feminist icon. And so I see so many people actually putting down her impact and legacy because of a stereotype that she wasn't as smart as she was. And actually a female lecturer today, and this is why I kind of wanted to bring this up within my speech, she insinuated that Marilyn would not be able to read Ulysses by James Joyce, which I found really bizarre because why is a man by today's standards had some very strange and unacceptable beliefs? Why is he the pillar for greatness or intelligence or a milestone you should achieve, at some point within your life? And I was like, I would rather be Marilyn Monroe than James Joyce, who's remembered for very strange things, but whatever. For some reason, when women use their femininity and sexuality, we used to, as a feminist group, throw them out of the icons club and note used to, because like take WAP, for example, Wet Ass Pussy by Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B, for those who aren't familiar. And I hope that is the very first time someone has said that in chamber. For the song to become so mainstream and so popular and just plays as much as it is, it shows at least to the proposition that feminist iconography, has been mentioned before, is developing further than things like status in the home and the workplace. The pushing of women to become famous or well known for these things, like saying "gobble me, swallow me" on national radio, is not a diminishing factor for who they are or being the first at something. It is simply something that needs to be done in terms of being a woman, and we should celebrate that women are taking those first steps instead of criticizing them for making that first step and being who they are. Oh yeah, and also within this concept of playing things like this on the radio in mainstream areas, it also highlights how much we actually have to do within Ireland, because the only feminist icons we actually have here are political ones, and women aren't really celebrated within this country unless they adhere to a certain ideal and unless they are near perfect. So really, this really does seem like a long-winded way of me getting to say the lyrics of WAP in chamber, but ideally the takeaway from this point is that I don't regret the creation of feminist icons, because what it means to be a feminist icon is changing. It changes with the times, and finally I think that society is allowing these icons to be unapologetically themselves. People like Alice Roosevelt Longworth, who is amazing, springs to mind. She was a woman who broke free of expected standards for the 1910s. She adhered to what she thought her own freedom should involve with. And women who are unapologetic as men, should be celebrated for taking that bold step forward. And that leads me to my second point. Living unapologetically as myself restores my faith in the concept of feminist icons, because realizing that feminist icons aren't perfect, I believe, are core to this debate, because we've heard it mentioned on proposition side that feminist icons will be a disappointment. Women, every person will be a disappointment in your life. If you're as big a perfectionist as I am, you will always be a disappointment. It can be an inspiration for anyone who believes in feminism to realize that people can be inherently flawed and yet achieve such great things. I think almost which is pushed forward is this kind of cookie cutter feminist. And I believe this concept can actually push people away from the feminist movement, because you don't need to be 100% politically literate or a driven person. You can make mistakes. You can like astrology, for fuck's sake. There is no perfect woman or no perfect feminist icon. And I believe the creation of feminist icons who are flawed should be encouraged, and that all women should be encouraged to have imperfections, because I wish I knew more about the flaws about my favorite celebrities and icons had when I was growing up, so I didn't have to feel like an outcast when I discovered my insecurities. I think we should all continue to create feminist icons for all, and I really don't want someone to create me into a yes girl, like girl boss, house down boots feminist. I want to be remembered as who I am, an extremely depressed, cat-obsessed Libra who cries when people raise their voice at her. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eva, finishing on a strong point. And I will now put the question to the House on the motion, this House regrets the creation of feminist icons. All in favour, please vote aye. All of those against, please vote nay.
While you're voting, I'll take another minute to remind you to fill out your oratory returns, which I can't find the link for at the moment, but if you scroll up, they're there somewhere. I really appreciate it, and so do the speakers. Thank you, Breed. So 15 more seconds to vote if you haven't yet. Normally we do this by yelling. That gets rid of the awkward silence part, but this is much more democratic. Okay, I'll end the polling now.
I think we should have in the back.
Sorry, can everyone see the results? Yeah.
Does that mean the motion is defeated?
Apparently.
Oh, excellent. I mean, excellent debate rather than assenting to the motion. Okay, I believe at this stage I can now address the House on this matter. This House regrets the creation of feminist icons. And as somebody who is not an iconoclast, who does not want to bring down all of my icons that I have believed in through my feminist life, and my feminism started reading Simone de Beauvoir, The Second Sex, and that brought me to feminism, and I see her as a feminist icon, despite the fact that I know of her feet of clay. And I think all our idols will have feet of clay, and we have to accept that. Though J.K. Rowling was mentioned, and I'm glad that she was brought up as somebody who had been a feminist icon, and now her feet of clay, her transphobia, have become very evident. So sometimes those feet of clay will bring down feminist icons. That doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't have feminist icons. And I don't think, Martha, you should look to the Daily Mail for a promotion of Margaret Thatcher as the feminist icon. I think we can disallow that. However, I would agree with, was it Alva was talking about our latter-day saints, our new feminist, secular feminist icons are our new saints. And for me, there are many saints that I could put up there. And one of them would be Cardi B. I do like Cardi B, and I do like that she was brought well into this. I actually also love AOC, and particularly I love AOC because she takes those guys on. and she puts them down, and they just don't know how to deal with her. So that's why they wanted to kill her when they invaded the capital. And the fact when she then spoke after the riot in the capital and the fact that she had to hide and she felt she was going to die, she spoke about trauma. She spoke about the fact that she was a sexual assault survivor and that the whole violence of the invasion of the capital had triggered those memories in her, and so she gave a shout out to that, and that allowed somebody with her influence and her power and her feminism gave sexual assault survivors and those who are living with trauma the language in many ways to be able to speak about, and that's only in the last week or so. And there are so many feminist icons out there that we could talk about. I hate those who put feminist icons who are brand feminism. And they are, I mean, they may be nice people, but frankly, the Kardashians are not feminism for me. The Duchess of Sussex doesn't do it for me in terms of feminist icons. Prince Harry, nah, I don't think so. I think we need to look to those who are intersectional in their feminism, who may have feet of clay, who may have stumbled along the way. I mean, we're all human beings, and if we stumble along the way, that doesn't mean our iconic status has to be taken away forever. In the case of people like J.K. Rowling, yes, it does. But somebody like Angela Davis, now there's a feminist icon. She's intersectional in her feminism. She's anti-race. She has campaigned long and hard for anti-racism. She is far left in her politics of equality and equity, and she has never given in, despite being imprisoned, despite being violently attacked, despite having her life under threat, having to go on the run. Angela Davis, for me, is a feminist icon. And as is, you know, if you look at feminist icons like, or trans feminist icons, Caitlyn Jenner doesn't do it for me, but Laverne Cox does it. I think we can pick and choose our icons if we use intersectional feminism to understand that commodification of feminism and the selling of feminist slogans on your brand doesn't make you a feminist icon, even if it makes you a billionaire, which would be nice if it could make a feminist icon a billionaire. I'm sorry, Kylie Jenner, you do not get to become a feminist icon. But if you are a feminist who believes in those brands, who believes in equality, who believes in empowering women, and not from a lean-in feminist perspective, sorry, Sheryl Sandberg, you're not a feminist icon, but from grassroots activism, from the ground up, from campaigning against gendered violence against women, for campaigning for changing the rape laws, for campaigning around equality and intersectional feminism, for campaigning against things like direct provision, for campaigning against, I mean, who would be our Irish feminist icon? I could pick so many. Most of them, I would say, being a historian, unfortunately, they're dead. But I'm sure there are a number of feminist icons. For me, feminist icons are Countess Markievicz. Yet people hate her because they say she killed a man. She was in a rebellion. I don't think she killed the guy because she wasn't there on the Stephen screen in the timeline, but that's my argument. But she gave up a life of privilege and died in poverty for her beliefs. She was a socialist. She was a feminist. She was a nationalist. And she kept true to all those, as she called them, the three great issues of Ireland. Kathleen Lynn is another great feminist. She managed to get a children's hospital up and running without it costing $2 billion. Eva Gore Booth, yes, another feminist icon. A woman who talked about queer feminism, who talked about changing gender, or had edited a magazine called Utopia that looked at how we discuss gender in the early 20th century before people ever began to have the language of trans feminism. And there are so many others. Today, I don't think I could name a feminist icon, but, you know, I love somebody like, I think Mary Robinson would come close in terms of Ireland. I think maybe my old comrade in gender studies in UCD, Alva Smith, might come close. I think all of the women who campaigned to repeal the 8th and all of the grassroots organizations. We can have a feminist iconic group, and that's the Repeal the 8 grassroots feminist campaigns, and they are fantastic. I think many of the women who are doing the grunt work of feminism can be feminist icons. One of my favorite feminist icons was a poor woman, a working class woman, a woman who gave her life for working class women's rights and who I campaigned to have a bridge named after in Dublin, Rosie Hackett. And now, as an iconic bridge, it's where feminist campaigns begin. So I think we need our feminist icons. If AOC could use the word bitch and talk about being called a bitch, I love Mary Beard for talking about how people call her a witch and comment on her looks and her hair and her teeth, and she keeps on going and keeps on talking about the silencing of women since the Greek times. So for that reason, I think we need our feminist icons, because we need hope. We need to see people who are doing things. We need our intersectional feminist icons because they give us hope. They give us a symbolic reason to keep going in our feminism. They write the books they read. They give the speeches that inspire us. And I am happy, although I must say there were some powerful speeches to propose this motion. I am happy to say that the motion was defeated in the House tonight. Thank you. Now, do I do? Yes.
Yep.
I would now like to call upon the auditor to announce the Society's forthcoming events.
First and foremost, just excellent chair speech from our amazing chair this evening. Thank you so much for that. And I love the many references to feminist figures or just women figures in history, particularly the Irish feminists. Love it. Also, congratulations to all the speakers this evening. At least in my book, you are all icons. So well done. So just on to the upcoming debates of the Society, or upcoming events of the Society. We have loads. I need to take a deep breath because I always end up out of breath here. But first and foremost, if you like this debate, you may like our other debates. Next week on Wednesday night, obviously, we will be debating "This House Believes the Irish Left Should Abandon Reunification." So really interesting debate about like the Irish left. Super excited for it. So please come along to that. But if you're not able to or whatever, we have other debates throughout the term. You can also sign up for our debates. So please do sign up for our debates. It's 7-minute speeches. We do a load of range of debates. So if you're interested in signing up, you can visit our website. Literally, there's a term card button. You click on that. And on that page, there's sign up forms. Please sign up for them. Honestly, it's a great way of getting a speak for the Society, which helps you to run for a position if you want to. But it's also just great to practice your public speaking, or rather Zoom speaking. But yeah. We also tomorrow have at 1 o'clock crafts and chats with in collaboration with Knitsock. So this is basically the event where we're coming together and we're gonna make some Valentine's Day crafts. Make a secret admirer card or something along those lines for Valentine's Day. Should be really wholesome and good fun. Then on Friday at 1 o'clock again, we will be having a Derby of Reddit collaboration with the Phil. And the theme is going to be on pop culture. So if you were inspired by this debate, feel free to sign up and give a speak on, feminism and pop culture. Could be really, really good. And then also on Friday evening, we have a comedy debate with DU players, lots of collaborations. And that comedy debate is on "This House Believes Irish Men Are Lousy Lovers." So kind of feminist, kind of, I don't know, is it feminist themed? It's certainly Valentine's Day themed. So if you're interested, please catch that on where I think we're streaming it on Facebook. We also have novice training on Friday as well. Feel free to come along to novice training if you want to pick up some skills about how to debate, how to structure arguments, that sort of thing. And finally, noon. Noon. I'm so sorry, noon. The Derby of Rhetoric is at noon, not 1 p.m. I don't know where I got 1 p.m. from. Apologies. And finally, please do fill out your oratory returns. It's super important that we basically have like a record of what people thought of the speeches. And again, at the end of the year, we give an awards basically to the best speakers, and the best speaker gets money. So please do fill it out. It's super quick and easy. Who doesn't love Google Forms? I mean, but yeah, that's everything from me. I just want to say, sorry, that's everything from me. I just want to thank the speakers again this evening. Really amazing speeches. Honestly, I was so like every speech I swapped side. Like I was like, I believe this, but I believe this. So amazing work. And also thank you again to our amazing chair. Such like amazing expertise, and we're delighted to have you chairing again this term. And yeah, so without further ado, I'll cede the floor back to the chair to end the evening.
Thank you very much, Madam Auditor, and thank you very much to all the speakers. I thoroughly enjoyed this evening, and now I'd like to call this House adjourned.
Excellent. Also, shout out to, we have an amazing Instagram story going on with people suggesting their feminist icons or who they consider feminist icons. So check out our Hist Instagram and see what people have to say about who they think are feminist icons. It's